Welcome to the Niche Pursuits Podcast. Are you ready to discover some niche business ideas that actually work? Well, it's time for a motivational kick to jumpstart your next big idea. Here's your host, Spencer Haas.
Hey everyone, welcome to another Niche Pursuits Podcast. I'm your host, Spencer Haas, and I have Perrin joining me here as co-host. Perrin, how you doing?
Pretty good. Thank you.
Awesome. So, I'm really excited today. We've got a very interesting topic that talks about dreams, passive income, what schedules are like for you and I, and email management, and probably a couple other topics all rolled into one.
Yep.
So it should be a good one. Today is episode 34, and it's titled, Does Passive Income Really Exist? My Life and Schedule as an Internet Entrepreneur. So, does passive income really exist? Maybe that's a little bit of a provocative title.
Yeah.
But it's a good question. The question really entails, once you reach a certain level in life of income and income on a passive level, do you stop working? Does that really happen? Do you suddenly have time to do nothing? And do people really do that?
Yeah.
So that's sort of the genesis of the question. But basically, the allure of passive income has been dreamed about by the average person for a really long time. When you go out to dinner with friends, one of your buddies might say, someday I'm not going to have to worry about paying for a night out on the town, or just wait and see. Someday I'm going to have a huge house. I'm not going to have any student loans, and I'm going to be living off the interest of my wealth.
Yes.
It's going to be totally passive. And then, of course, there's the more lazy dreamers that might exclaim, I can't wait to win the lottery someday so that I won't ever have to work another day in my life.
Yep.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm not exempt from that.
All right.
Before I started reading books on entrepreneurship and really shifted my mindset, I bought scratchers tickets every week, and it was those kind where it's like, if you win, it's $20,000 a week for the rest of your life or whatever, Spending $10 on a chance to get what I wanted, which was that passive income. So, it's I think it's a very common dream.
Yep, it is a very common dream, and I should also kind of state where my perspective is coming from a little bit going into this discussion, is because my perspective probably has changed over the past few years. When I was working my day job, regular 9 to 5, and not making extremely great money, enough to support me and my family, but not much else, that was about it. Not a whole lot of savings and investments other than just the basics. I probably did dream a little bit more about the day where I could only work, a couple hours a day and do whatever I wanted. I'd go golfing and fishing all the time. But now I've partially achieved some of my income dreams, if you will, because I quit my job 3 years ago. My income level is significantly more than it was before. There's plenty left over at the end of each month to save and invest. And because I work for myself, I'm not required to work, 8 or 9 hours a day. I can kind of put in the time that I want. But now that I'm in this position, I'm not looking for that passive income. I don't want to sit around and fish and golf all day. Sometimes I do want to go on vacation, but I'm not really looking to just sit around all day and do things that aren't productive.
Yeah.
And so, if I go back to a lot of people that are working day in and day out, they have families, maybe they're students, or they are looking to get that entry-level job, or they have that job, but they're just putting in a lot of hours without a lot of money left over at the end of the month. The dream of passive income can be very alluring. It's a nice dream that they think about all the time.
Yeah, and I think I don't know, maybe I'll just say how it was for me and you kind of tell me how it was for you, because
Okay.
I never thought about passive income when I was in college, I know
Mm.
there are a lot of people like our good friend Hayden who has always thought about creating passive income for himself, but when I was in college, what I dreamed about was a job, I was like,
True.
man, I'm going to get my degree, I'm going to go get a good job and I'll have money and it's going to be great. But I think it's really a shock to a lot of people, especially people like myself who have a really easy time putting in 100% to things that they're excited about and a really difficult time putting in 100% to things that they're not excited about. When you go out there and you've graduated college and you finally get a job, it's a culture shock because you're usually not excited about your work. It's something that you have to be doing. There's no personal investment in it. And I think it's that kind of situation that makes a lot of people dream about, doing nothing. But I think what I found and what you have found is that doing nothing may not be the best, most fulfilling solution.
Yeah, that is an excellent point to bring up. The entire culture that we live in, at least in America, and I think it's similar worldwide, that the American dream even is set up in a way where, you go to high school, you do the best you can so you can get into a good college, and you get into a good college and pick a degree so that, when you graduate from college, you're going to hold that piece of paper and everybody is going to come running to you offering you a job.
Mm.
And they're going to give you an awesome job because you just went through 4 years of college and you are a standout and you're awesome.
Yep.
And once you get that job, you're going to be able to work up in the ladder, or you're going to enjoy it because that's what you want to do. And you're going to be able to put money each month into a nice retirement savings account. And when you're 65, you're going to be able to retire and go on vacation.
Yeah.
And so, that's how the entire system is set up, what I just explained.
And did you, when you were going through college and going through the job searching process, did you personally sort of fall into that mindset?
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
Totally. Yeah. Your experience is probably very similar to mine. Yeah. I figured I got a degree in finance. I figured, I'm going to go be analyzing stocks and I'm going to be, doing this and that, things that I enjoy. And I'm going to be helping people. And at the same time, I'm going to be saving up money.
Yeah.
But it's a culture shock. You go out and suddenly I'm some guy stuck in the back of a cubicle in the back of the office that, the important people at the firm really don't care about.
Yeah.
It's just a recent college grad, who cares?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's really the way it is. And when you go to school, you are not applying a lot of what you learned in college at your job. Most of the jobs in America are on the job training.
Yep.
To be honest, there are a few dedicated degrees that you can apply directly to your job, such as engineering, probably computer programming, and maybe a couple of others. But even the medical fields, most of that's probably on the job as well.
Sure, yeah. And I got my degree in poetry, so I
Right.
applied absolutely nothing to my job. But I think you're right, and I think it's different with our generation. And I don't want to disclose how old you are, but we're like 7, 8 years apart or something, right?
Yep.
Closer than people might think. I don't know if I seem really young or...
I seem old.
Yeah.
Maybe, I don't know.
But, I think our generation places a much higher value on flexibility and leisure time, Like
Mm-hmm.
when I talk to my dad or my girlfriend's dad, these are guys who got a job and stuck with it most of the time, Not so much my dad, but a lot of people in that generation, it's kind of that's what they did. They got a job and they stuck with it until they retired. And that's absolutely not what this generation who is currently in the workforce or just entering the workforce values. We like our leisure time and we like the options to go on vacation or hang out with our family or, not work till 7 at night and that sort of thing.
Yeah, and I also think it's not just so much that we maybe value leisure time and those things differently, although that's probably certainly the case, but also that our generation sees options. And
Yes.
there are options. You know, back in our parents' day, the internet didn't exist.
Yep.
To start up a software company or a website in your free time was not a possibility. You know, obviously I talk about that a lot, but there's a lot of other side businesses outside of the internet. There's more options now, and the younger generation is seeing more and more successful entrepreneurs, and they want to emulate those people. And
Yep.
I think that's a good thing because we don't have to grow up in a traditional, you know, American dream sort of way. Um, there are pathways to wealth that do not include a 4-year degree or do not include working at the same job for 30 years and, you know, putting 10% of your income into a 401k each month. Although I still recommend doing the 401k bit. But, you know, there's other ways to accumulate wealth and not, I mean, I look at where I am, you know, there's no way I could have made as much money as I am now in a traditional job. You know, the possibility of skyrocketing your income level is just so much greater when you're out on your own.
Yeah, I think that's one of the major shifts in my mindset. And I kind of realized it actually after having a conversation with my brother, having already left my own corporate job. I really realized it looking at my dad in retrospect. So for anybody who doesn't know, I don't think anybody does, but my dad did work a pretty steady job for a long time, but he eventually realized that he hated it and he went out to be an entrepreneur. And he started, I think, a transmission shop and several other businesses that failed before he finally started a roofing company that he grew to a multi-million-dollar business before the recession hit. But my dad is, a really likable guy, but he has no college degree. He dropped out of college. He got expelled from high school, I think, for like riding his motorcycle through the hall or something ridiculous like that. He's like a war vet and like kind of all over the place. Really likes to have fun. Really likes people and everything.
Hmm.
Um, but never had a trade, never had a degree. He kind of built cars for fun, but that was it. But I was talking to my brother, and when I was talking to him, I had this epiphany that there is no job in America that my dad could apply for and make over $100,000 a year, which he was in his own business.
Right.
Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, six-figure jobs are few and far between for the, you know, the elite, if you will.
Yeah.
Or if you've worked at a company for 20 years and worked your way up, you know, maybe you can achieve that level.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, it's funny you bring up your dad, and I know we've talked about this, but my dad worked at the same job. He was a civil engineer and worked at the same, well, you know, as a civil engineer for 25 years
Hmm.
or so. And eventually, I think the breaking point is he started to realize how much money his boss was making. You know,
Okay.
my dad had basically, you know, he was the senior engineer at the firm, but he was the only people above him were the owners.
Right.
And he saw how much money they were making, and he was doing all the work. He's like, I'm going to go start my own civil engineering firm. And so eventually did at, you know, sort of the end of his career. He was in his 50s, you know, mid 50s when he finally went out and started his own civil engineering firm. And it did very, very well for him. You know, he sold
Yeah.
it 10 years later for, anyways, for way more than he ever could have made
Sure.
as an employee. So maybe that's the seed of being an entrepreneur is because of my dad, and so I thank him for that. You
Yeah.
know, it's cool to see when one of your own parents does it.
Yeah. And that specific question is really important. And maybe we said this in the last podcast, or maybe it was just a conversation. I don't know. But that question of how much are the owners making? Or, even more specifically, how much are the owners making off of me? I think is a question that any laborer should be asking, and then evaluating if they can do the same thing on their own. Because even if you don't have a fancy job, even if you're just a window washer, asking how much can I make just washing windows on my own, um,
Hmm.
I think is the type of question that moves a lot of people into entrepreneurship. For me, when I was at that big consulting firm, they were paying me $52,000 a year, and when I did the math on my billables, they were making $400,000 off of me. So it's a really jarring thing to realize that they're paying you like less than 20% of what they're making off of you, and
Hmm.
it can be a nice little shove into entrepreneurship and wanting to do your own thing.
Yep, absolutely. That's a great point. And it's true. Wherever you work, um, somewhere up at the ladder, there's an owner. Somebody owns the whole process, the whole business, and they don't make money if they're not, if it's not profitable. So they have to pay you less than they bring in, basically. And I mean, that maybe sounds bad. I don't think there's big bad business people out there that are trying to gyp employees.
Sure.
That's maybe not what not what I'm trying to say. But your question was exactly right. Just that, how much money are the owners making, and can I do this myself?
Yep.
So, all right, now that I think we've sidetracked a little bit there, let's try to jump back into this
Sure.
passive income question. So, um, we've talked a lot about being an entrepreneur, but the dream of passive income, I guess, for people when people start researching, certainly in the internet marketing world, and maybe they're watching late night infomercials, they hear all these schemes, if you will, about how you can make money, and eventually it becomes passive, and you're just living off the interest. Is that dream even possible? And if it is possible, is it really everything that it's cracked up to be, to have this passive income rolling in?
Hmm.
And so that's kind of what I want to go over, in addition to eventually talking about my own schedule. So, um, there's a lot of people, the very wealthiest of people, that have achieved a level of success where they could be living off of the income from their investments.
Yep.
You look at people like Bill Gates, who's worth $72 billion, and Warren Buffett, worth $58.5 billion, and many other people on the 400 richest people list in Forbes. If some of that was just invested in, bonds or dividend paying investments, they could live very rich lives just off of the interest without ever touching the principal of those investments.
Yep.
And so I actually looked at this list of the 400 richest people in America, and I wanted to see, okay, how many of these people are just sort of passive, were people that were born into money, that were just inherited all of their money and probably are just living passively off of this income. Probably the most well-known heirs are the Sam Walton descendants, the founder of Walmart. All of his children and probably now grandchildren, I don't know, they're all worth, millions and some billions. And they can just live off of that interest. But the nice thing to see about this list is that most of the people on it are self-made billionaires.
Yeah.
In their own lifetime, they went out and created the company, or they, invested in the right things and created their own wealth. And so that's really, really nice to see, is that, hey, there's nothing holding any of us back. I mean, we can achieve wealth. It's possible to do in our own lives. We don't have to inherit that money.
Yeah. I think that's kind of the second part of that mindset shift. Um, is that you can do it. It is possible. And I really learned this lesson, I think, from reading The Millionaire Fastlane. Have you ever read that book?
I have read it. It's a good one.
Yeah, it's a good one. And like as far as practical knowledge, I didn't think it was too rich. But as far as just getting yourself in the right mindset, I think it's really valuable, because that lesson is important, that it is possible to create your own wealth. And while we may not be billionaires, like we'd probably be luckier to play in the NBA, but it's it's definitely possible to create a lifestyle or a lifestyle business for yourself.
Yeah, and the other thing that I looked at here is, okay, these are people that have created this wealth in their own lifetime. But as I looked at some of the wealthiest people on this list, at least the ones that I knew, such as Bill Gates, Warren Buffett, Jeff Bezos of Amazon, Mark Zuckerberg started Facebook, Phil Knight started Nike, Elon Musk started Tesla Motors and other things, James Jannard started Oakley Sunglasses, and James Leprino started, I believe it's Leprino Cheese. So he made all his money in mozzarella cheese. Yeah, that's kind of a fun one. But all of these people, they've made enough to live passively, but none of them are. That's what I found really interesting, is that when they've reached this level of success where they can sit back and go fishing and golfing all day, they're not. They're out running their businesses, starting new ventures, and now many of them are involved in nonprofit organizations, charity work that are, they're either donating their money or doing other things to help the poor.
Yep.
So why is that? Why are these people not being lazy? Why are they not being passive about their income? And maybe I won't delve into it too much, but the simple answer really is that these people are all very high achievers, and they'd probably get really bored if they were not out making some sort of impact on the world.
Sure.
And so that's a similar realization that I've come to in my own life. I'm nowhere near worth, what these people are making, and I still need to work to bring in my income. I can't be 100% passive, but even if I could, I don't think I'd ever want to. I'd never be happy or even comfortable in my situation if I was just taking a vacation every day. I need to be productive, and I enjoy being productive.
Yeah, and I'm finding myself having a similar realization too. It wasn't even a couple months ago that I think we were on one of our weekly calls, and I said what it really is about for me is getting to a point where it's just Twinkies and video games from 9 to 5, and now, and obviously I'm not worth $1 billion either, but I am at a point where my websites pay 100% of my bills. So maybe I should thank Jeff Bezos for paying my bills in addition to his.
That's right, Amazon.
Yeah,
associates.
Because when I get my check from Amazon, I pay my bills with it, and that's what I do. So I could, if I wanted to, live 100% passively, but I found out very quickly that there's just so much exciting, fulfilling stuff, and I really like just building things that I'm proud of. That's a fun thing to do for me, and all the stuff that we're doing is, exciting and different, and most of the time it doesn't feel like work. And so if someone said to me, you have the option to just live passively tomorrow, I don't know if I'd do it.
Exactly. And you would think, what would happen if you achieved, some level where you knew you never had to work another day in your life? You'd probably sit and think long and hard, okay, what do I really want to do with my life? What do I really enjoy doing, and where do I want to spend my time? And so that might be creating some other business that aligns with sort of those internal desires that you have, or perhaps, volunteering more or teaching other people. I think eventually people probably get to a point where they want to give back in some way. Whether that's, all sorts of different ways. People want to sort of help others, I think, is the point that eventually, I think internally, most people get to.
Yep.
So, I think a better phrase than passive income is residual income. Right. A way to think about is, I don't even ever want to get to a point where I'm passive in my life, because I never could. I'd always want to be doing something more. But if I think about setting up businesses that generate residual income, it just sounds nicer to me.
Yeah.
I guess. I want to set something up that, sure, I'm going to work like crazy, maybe for years, to set up a business that can run on its own through systems, and is generating residual income for me, not so I can go and be on vacation, but so that maybe I can put my energies in some other things, other businesses or other ventures or activities.
Yep. Yeah, and we do that on a small scale all the time, A Penny Shaved took 120 hours maybe of really hard work to create, especially since I wrote all the content, but it now affords me a greater level of freedom than I had before.
And I've done the same thing with my Longtail Pro business. It's been up and running for a little over 3 years now, and I've been able to set up systems and put things in place where I can basically take myself out of the business for the most part.
Yep.
And this is based on a lot of the recommendations by Michael Gerber. He wrote the book, The E-Myth Revisited, a great book, which is all about how to basically take the entrepreneur out of the business. Instead of working in your business, working on your business.
Yeah.
So you're not the guy in there flipping the burgers yourself, but you've set up the systems where the burger joint runs itself.
Yep.
And you just, manage or make sure it's all running properly, and hopefully eventually you have a manager running it for you, and you just collect the check as the entrepreneur.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's kind of what I've done with my Longtail Pro business. Here's kind of how it works. Some of the points that make it more automated, make it a residual business. People go out and they find Longtail Pro via Google or other blogs. And all these things I'm going to mention no longer require my work, my input. This just happens now. Users then, they go watch demo videos and sales videos and read testimonials on longtailpro.com. They register and download a free trial of the software. An autoresponder series begins, and they get regular updates from me. These are emails that I wrote, a long time ago. And then the prospects, they get discounts via email automatically after a certain period of time if they haven't purchased yet. And when they do buy, the software is delivered automatically with user manual, demo videos, and more. The payment's all done online automatically. And then if the users have a question, they can file a support ticket, and it goes to my customer support rep who handles all of those queries, again, without my involvement. If a bug pops up in the software, my customer support rep, he files a ticket with my programmer, and then my programmer fixes the bug as requested. And then the software updates themselves are also delivered automatically. I don't have to send everyone an email or anything like that. So those are all things that happen automatically, residually, if you will, without my input in Longtail Pro, in my Longtail Pro business. Now, clearly, there are some aspects of Longtail Pro where I do have to still be involved, such as strategic decisions overall, for any major big updates that I want to make, ongoing marketing, and other details that I do still handle. So I'm not completely free. It's not completely residual, but for the most part, it is. And so, really, the residual income that I get from that business, and for the small amount of time that I put into that, means that, I'm working considerably less than someone would be working at a traditional job, a 9-to-5 job, but I'm making much, much more than, really a normal 9-to-5 job would be.
Yep.
And so now I wanted to dive into, so if I'm not working so much in my Longtail Pro business, where am I spending all my time each day? And I've gotten this question quite a bit from readers. They want to know what I'm spending my time in. What does a typical day look like for an internet entrepreneur?
Uh-huh.
And so I wanted to just run through what a typical day looks like for me. Every day is a little bit different, and some days I do some things and other days I don't. So this won't be an exact replica of what every day looks like, but this is kind of a normal average day. And then, like with life, other things happen, or I have other activities planned, but this is a fairly normal schedule for me that I'm going to run through. And also I should say that I'm going to give you my entire schedule from when I wake up to when I go to bed. I do have 4 kids and I'm married, and so a lot of my time is spent with my family as well, so I'm going to be mentioning those. This won't just be my work schedule, but this will give you a pretty realistic look into my life and what I do. So first, 7 a.m. approximately, I wake up, and then from 7 to 8:30, I am eating breakfast. I get my kids up and ready for school. I will say it's summertime now, so it's a little bit different, but 9 months out of the year, they're in school, and this is what it looks like. I wake them up, get them breakfast, I make their lunches, and then I drive them to school myself and drop them off. My wife is at home taking care of our newborn baby that is only 2 months old. So that's what she's doing, which is a handful. And then I jump into my own work schedule. So at about 8:30, for about 5 minutes, I write down all the tasks that I want to accomplish that day, sort of set goals for me. And often I will even prioritize these tasks, 1 through 10 or whatever it is. And then I jump into my email at about 8:35 to 9. I'm responding to emails. From 9 to 9:30, I answer Longtail Pro customer questions. These are ones that are either sent to my personal inbox rather than filing a support ticket, or if there's any escalated Longtail Pro support tickets, I jump in there and respond to those. And then, I will just interject here that I'm almost a little bit embarrassed sharing my schedule at some parts here, such as this. From 9:30 to 10, I finally take a shower. I shower and shave and get dressed. Yeah, I'm kind of weird that way. I don't know what it is. I wait till the middle of the day. But so then from 10 to maybe 11:30-ish, I research, I write, and I edit blog posts for nichepursuits.com. And so it usually takes me at least a couple of days to write a blog post. So that's what I'll do, let's say Monday and Tuesday from 10 to 11:30. I'm working on a blog post and getting it published. Then from 11:30 to noon, I usually just kind of check my earnings stats, traffic stats for all my websites, and do some other minor analysis, just kind of looking at the numbers and everything. And then from noon to 1, I eat lunch and I read books. Or I have my iPad and I'll read through other blogs or any other industry news, that sort of thing. Just sort of spend an hour being lazy, reading books, eating, and that sort of thing. 1 to 1:30, I respond to more emails, Skype messages, blog comments, anything else that's come up there. From 1:30 to 3 in the afternoon, I'm either doing a call with Perrin, with you, which, right now it's 2:30, so I'm right on schedule for doing that call. Yeah. We review niche sites, or I'm doing podcast interviews with others, or I'm doing calls with business partners or associates, or I'm writing for other blogs that I own, or other general business tweaks for Longtail Pro or other websites. So the afternoon is kind of a catch-all. I don't have a set thing that I'm doing, but I'm usually not doing a lot of writing in the afternoon. It's more calls and strategy and that sort of thing. And then from 3 to 4, I'm answering emails again, responding to Longtail Pro tickets, or if I have some time, I might read some other blogs in the industry, or just other general administrative tasks. And that wraps up, for the most part, my workday. Then from 4 to 5:30, I go out for a run. I might run, 4 or 5 miles and shower and all that. And I help my wife out with the kids as needed. Then from 5:30 to 6:30, I have dinner with the family. 6:30 to 8, I'm spending time with my family. That could be all sorts of things. They might have activities, gymnastics or ball games or whatever. We might just go to the park or play in the backyard. Anyways, family time. Then from 8 to 9, I'm getting kids ready for bed. And yes, it is really an hour-long task, at least. Those with kids know. Brushing teeth, getting pajamas on, reading books, yada, yada, yada. Putting them back to bed after they get out of bed. And then from 9 to 11, I answer a few more. Okay, so from 9 to 11 actually is more my veg time. So really, I usually sit down in front of the TV And sometimes I have my laptop in front of me, sometimes I don't. I might watch TV with my wife, or at the same time as watching TV, I check emails or check stats, or I might just go read a book.
Yeah.
And then at 11 o'clock, I go to bed. So there it is. That's my typical schedule.
Yeah.
Anything you wanted to note about that? Oh, I will say that all throughout the day, I'm chatting with Perrin via, text chat, GChat, or Skype, and as other little tasks come up for our niche sites, we're working on those together.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if I have anything to add for your schedule, but I think it might be valuable for the readers to note that I run my business, meaning my niche sites, not including Vilo, pretty much only on the weekends and maybe a little bit each night. But,
Mm-hmm.
like right now, I put all of my energy more or less into Saturday. So this last month I invested a couple $1,000s into content. And so I kind of give my writers all the instructions and stuff one Saturday, let them run for the week, and then spend all of that next Saturday managing the writers, editing their posts and things like that. But before that, I might spend all Saturday writing, or I might spend all Saturday researching, a big list of keywords or some other thing. So if you're only doing niche sites, if you don't have something as massive as the long tail pro business, plus a big portfolio of websites, you can even squeeze it into a Saturday.
Mm-hmm. Yep, absolutely. And there were a couple of comments on this blog post of people asking, well, where in your schedule, Spencer, is all your time spent building niche websites? I don't see that. Where is it?
Mm-hmm.
And for those listening and those who read, if they hadn't quite figured it out, well, Perrin is the one that manages my entire niche website business. So he's working full time, 8 hours a day, 40 hours a week, running my niche website business. So, which I greatly appreciate, by the way.
Yeah.
So that I can do other things. So Perrin and I, like I said, we're chatting throughout the day as little things come up. He's managing writers, VAs, tweaking websites based on strategy that I set. So once a week we do a strategy call for an hour and a half or so, and then he goes and he fulfills that throughout the week. So we review, a dozen or so niche websites, and he goes out and makes it happen. And so he's managing all the writers and everything else. And so that's why you don't see in my schedule me doing that, because, well, I'm not. I do the one strategy call, Perrin does it, and it's a constant feedback loop to make sure everything goes right. And yes, I jump in and do some things as well, but it's not like you can see significant portion of my schedule anymore.
And I can see the question coming. Like, Perrin, you would just spend so much time preaching against not having a job. Why are you working 8 hours a day now? Why am I working 8 hours a day for Spencer?
Yep.
And the reason is because, first of all, I have much more stake in the business. The more this succeeds, the more I succeed. I think, second of all, this job is much different than most other jobs because it's, one, something I really enjoy doing. Like I sort of found my passion for SEO when I created my first niche site, and I just really like it. And secondly, we have so many opportunities to do so many cool things that it continues to be exciting on basically every scale. So like, it's really exciting to see sites succeed on like a daily basis, but also we're talking about some other really cool things where we might do, a year from now, or how we might grow an even bigger company, And I think lastly, it's also an investment, I I really could live off of my own sites right now, but working this job is going to afford me much greater freedom in the future by becoming a part of really cool things, networking with really cool people, paying off loans faster, and things like that. So, so don't write me emails calling me a hypocrite.
That's right, and it is a little bit different because, like most Well, unlike most day jobs, I've said this from the beginning to you that I hope someday you are your own full-time entrepreneur.
Mm-hmm.
I don't expect this to be forever. It might be a couple of years you're working for me, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm hoping on the side you're building up your own income stream so that eventually you can leave me and go off on your own and grow and do great things. I fully expect that to happen and hope it happens. So anybody that I'm involved with, I want them to be as entrepreneurial as possible because it just makes the most sense for everybody. So it is a little bit different situation, and you do have a well, let's just say a revenue stake. The more my business makes, the more you're going to eventually make
Yep.
as well.
Yep.
We have some agreements and things like that. So it's a very entrepreneurial job as well. So
Plus, I mean, yeah, it's entrepreneurial in a couple of ways. First of all, it's entrepreneurial just because I have a stake in the business, and I'm doing entrepreneurial activities. But also, my hours are flexible, and so like it's not like I'm working like I get up and I start working, and Spencer is chatting me every 5 minutes saying, "What are you doing? What are you doing?" It's
right.
I basically set my own hours, and I think one of the major takeaways from what we're talking about here is that it's not doing nothing that's important. It's freedom that's important. It's the ability to be flexible and do what you want. Um, and working from home
Totally.
affords that capability.
Yeah, it is. And I think that is the big lesson or takeaway from this is just the freedom aspect. And I think most people, when they say passive income, that's probably what they're referring to.
Yeah.
And so maybe, some of the points I make were, maybe a little bit strong. I really don't think everybody wants to be lazy and not work all day, but they want to work on their own time. They want to work on their own projects, things that they are interested in. They want to be able to take a vacation for a week when they want. They don't want to have to ask for time off and get shut down by their boss because it's holiday season,
Yeah.
or whatever.
Yeah.
They want the freedom, and that is the big thing. And so by setting up hopefully a residual business or a business that allows you the time to work on your business and not on the day-to-day activities in your business, you can have that freedom to do the things that you want. And probably, to start off with, have a nice lifestyle business. And if you want to grow it into something bigger, you can certainly do that. But I think most people out there are looking for at least some sort of lifestyle business where they're comfortable, have the freedom, and can still receive that residual income.
Yeah, and it's probably worth making the point that it doesn't have to be an internet business, Residual
Right.
income can come with any kind of business depending on what you're good at. I was just having this conversation with my neighbor who, was laid off through a really shady situation. And I said, well, why don't you start your own business? She said, what can I do? I said, everybody has skills, and some jobs don't take skills. You can wash windows, you can mow lawns. No offense to the lawnmowers out there. But
Mm-hmm.
if you mow lawns on your own and then you build up a clientele and you might have enough to hire one employee, which gives you more time to grow the business, and then you have two employees and then maybe you hire a manager, and after a couple of years that's residual income and it's 100% offline. So just because it's not niche size doesn't mean it can't be residual.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. There are so many things out there that people could be doing. And so the final thing that I will just say is that I finally did have the chance to finish that college football book. It was called The System, The Glory and Scandal of Big Time College Football by Jeff Benedict and Armin Katayan. It was a really good book. I thought it was going to be more about scandals in college football because that word was there. And certainly there were some things. There's a lot of college football players that are always getting in trouble with the law. But it covered more just stories all along the way at every level of college football, from new recruits doing some awesome things to players getting injured and losing the hopes and dreams of playing in the NFL, to how coaches work and just the huge amounts of money that college football generates. A really interesting book with a lot of interesting stories. And it'll make you think quite a bit when you sit back and you watch a college football game with 100,000 fans there about the dollars that are being made and what's going on behind the scenes to make that revenue. A lot of interesting things going on. And one interesting point that was made by the book is that despite the millions and millions of dollars a lot of these college football programs are bringing in, very few of them are profitable. Very few. Mm-hmm. Because they spend so much money on stadiums, so much on coaches and everything, equipment. They actually lose money. But most of them do that because it's the best way that they have to promote their brand, promote their college. So University of Texas is so well known, and people go there and sign up for college because of the college football team, really. Yep. And same with Alabama and Ohio State and all these other big, huge college football programs. It's a way to promote their brand, is having a winning football team. So, anyways, that's my book review. I don't know if you have any others that you'd like to add, Perrin?
Maybe not a book, but some recommended reading for sure. So,
okay.
That's kind of in line with this topic. Anybody interested in some other ways of creating residual income or getting a peek into a community who is doing that? Because, we all know the SEO blogs by now, you know what I mean? And we all know a whole bunch of people making niche sites, but if you head over to the subreddit Entrepreneur Ride Along, that's our Entrepreneur Ride Along. It's a community of people who have made their living with made businesses, like residential cleaning businesses. And it was a community started by a guy named Rohan a couple years ago, and a few of them have $1 million businesses now. So it's 100% offline, very residual business that these guys are creating from scratch. So some good recommended secondary reading if you are interested in this topic.
Some very cool. People can go check that out. So other than that, I just want to thank everybody for listening in to this episode of the Niche Pursuits podcast. And like always, if you have the chance to leave a rating or review on iTunes, it would be very much appreciated. You can do that by going to nichepursuits.com/iTunes. Thank you very much for listening, and best of luck in your business.